Hey there, it's Tracy, your resident author, and my new tips for writing are just three things when you're starting a new book. Is number one, to make sure that your inciting incident happens at least, I would say, by page 10 or by the first part of chapter 2. Nobody wants to read a lot of work and we haven't quite gotten to where people are and where something exciting is going to happen. Either the main characters are on the page together and there's something that jump starts, or something happens to one of the main characters where that can make it more interesting. But just to have a little bit of point of view from the main character and nothing's happening, even if he's thinking about the other main character, the heroine or the hero, that's kind of boring and your story could fall flat. The only way to make sure that something is happening is to make something happen to them, even if the other character, their love interest, this is in a romance, is going to come later. That's okay, that's fine. But something interesting still happened to the main character. And that is worth hanging on to see how it's going to play out for them and to see if they're all right. So I'm already interested if something happens to at least one of them, or there's some kind of big blowout, or some kind of revelation, or maybe the character is even in the dark waiting for something or snooping around in an office. These are just examples. Some examples where my main characters haven't been on the same page would be one, in Deadly Affections, the main heroine witnesses the kidnapping of the love interest, the hero's little girl. So only the heroine and the hero's little girl are kidnapped in the first chapter of Deadly Affections, which is one of my books in the Parker Brothers series. That is interesting because you want to know when children are involved. First of all, that's really interesting. People care about children and usually are fur babies and old people sometimes. But the other thing is that even though she hasn't yet met him, she doesn't know him, you want to know and you are invested in who she is as a person and how she is going to care for this person that she's in charge of. And she ends up following, she sees a little girl get taken and she follows that van to wherever the point is, wherever the spot is that they're going to take her, and leaps out and tries to save her before she could be involved in something else, maybe trafficking or just taken or sent off to another country. She has no idea. The other thing that you learn about the main character, even though the other hero isn't on the page, you learn that she is caring, she is daring, she's somewhat confident to be taking this risk, and she has a good heart because she stepped in to save someone when she could have just stayed back and called the police. Now, I added a monkey wrench in this story in that she was starting a new job and she was at the home of the person who is pregnant and on maternity leave and was going to have an interview at her house. So the woman was going to be hired by a close friend that she knew in childhood and hadn't seen her in years. So she didn't have Wi-Fi and she didn't have a cell phone because of her previous job, which was on a mercy ship. She hadn't got everything squared away. She thought that her new boss, she was already hired for the job. She was going to do like an interview and a debriefing and to get started working in her new role. But she had no cell phone. She had no Wi-Fi because she thought her boss was probably going to supply her with a phone because the work that they do is with a women's shelter. And so, of course, a lot of jobs give you a cell phone. And a lot of people sometimes are using those cell phones and not getting their own, even though they should. That's a whole other topic for another thing. The second thing is that to make sure that people have chemistry. If it's okay if they don't like each other, if you're doing a enemies to lovers, but they really should have strong dislike. It can't be a superficial dislike. There has to be some reason why people aren't getting along. Either there's a mistake one has about the other, or there's some other thing they heard through the ether that gives them a negative connotation about the person. And that will up your chemistry and up the ante in the relationship and make sure that these people, when they finally do have a revelation and turn their thoughts around, it'll be really worth it. It'll be really interesting. It'll be really good. Next is that you just have to sometimes keep writing a little bit of trash. There is a saying, write the trash until you get to the good part. Where your story begins, you may have to write at least 2 to 4 pages of total junk. And if you keep going, that's when it will get better and better and more interesting. So when you're writing that, you know that it's not that good. You know that it's bad. It could be salvageable. There could be something that you could put in there to make it more interesting. But for the most part, you're going to end up cutting that. And when you cut things, don't ever delete them. Don't ever get rid of them. Just start a new document and put all your cuts and pastes in that document for later, because you may use it. You may be able to fix it. And like I said, salvage it. And you may be able to just zhuzh it up and put it back in the story. Maybe not right then at the beginning, but it could be definitely some stuff that comes later. and you just never know. So you don't want to get rid of it. You don't want to trash it. You want to hold on to it and just take it out of the story. You don't even have to take it out of the main story. You could just make it another color. You could bold it, and you could just hit enter 1,000 times and move it down way below. Sometimes that's what I do also to trick myself into thinking I have a larger word count than I do, because eventually I will get to that word count, but just seeing that it's a little bit inflated can be motivating, which I guess could be tip 4, is to sometimes keep some of the words that you have, even though you might not use them. If you go back and read them later, they may sound more interesting and you may be able to figure out what you had missing. Hope you enjoyed those tips. I'll be back next time with even more writing tips and more author life experiences by me, your resident author, Tracy Lydia Garner. To read the book about the kidnapping, His Deadly Affections, there may be a new story in that series, and I hope to have news about that later this year. Take care and bye-bye.